You're not supposed to know this. In the frozen winter of 1847, 4 women vanished from a Utah cabin without a trace, their footprints erased by a snow that hid more than the ground. Ezekiel Whitmore, their husband, said they left for family in the East. But the truth is far darker. A secret the Mormon Church buried for decades, locked in vaults only the elite could access. This isn't just a story. It's a descent into forbidden history, where faith twisted into something monstrous. You're about to uncover what they didn't want you to see, a truth so dangerous it could shatter the foundations of belief. Are you ready to step into the shadows? The Utah Territory was a crucible of dreams and despair, a barren desert where Brigham Young's followers carved out Zion, isolated by mountains and snow. Ezekiel Whitmore arrived in 1847, a carpenter with 4 wives, bound by the secret doctrine of plural marriage. His cabin in Mill Creek stood alone, miles from help, a fortress of solitude and secrets. Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, and Ruth, each wife brought strength, but their harmony hid something unnatural, a unity that felt like control. Visitors noticed marks on their wrists, identical cuts they dismissed as accidents. Were they bound by love or something far worse? The winter of 1847 was brutal, with blizzards trapping families in their cabins. Ezekiel's household seemed to thrive, but beneath the surface, something was unraveling. By December, whispers of strange behavior reached the main settlement. Ezekiel spoke of divine revelations, his eyes wild with a fire no one could name. His wives, once vibrant, grew silent, their movements synchronized like puppets on a string. What was happening in that isolated cabin? The truth would challenge everything the pioneers believed about faith, family, and the cost of salvation. This is no ordinary tale. It's a warning. Once you hear it was a temple of secrets built on a foundation of control. As we descend deeper, ask yourself, what would you sacrifice for eternal glory? The answer might scare you. Keep listening, because the truth is only getting darker. You're still here, descending deeper into a truth most would flee from. Ezekiel Whitmore's cabin stood like a sentinel in the Utah wilderness, its walls hiding a growing horror. By late January 1848, his story was unraveling faster than the snow could bury it. He returned to the settlement, gaunt and wild-eyed, claiming Rebecca, his second wife, had also left for the East, a teacher on a divine mission. Bishop Curtis pressed him. Who were these travelers braving a frozen hell? Ezekiel's answers were a tangle of nonsense. Missionaries, mountain men, God's will. His trembling hands betrayed him. The bishop's suspicion hardened into resolve. Something was wrong, and it wasn't just Ezekiel's lies. The community buzzed with unease, whispers of a man undone by isolation, or something far worse. On February 3rd, Curtis led a group through the snow to confront the truth. The cabin was a tomb of silence, Ezekiel alone by a weak fire. He claimed Mary and Ruth, the last wives, had recovered from illness and joined the others east, escorted by trappers. But the rooms told a different story. Emptied of personal items, yet heavy furniture remained, untouched. Behind the cabin, fresh-dug earth mocked Ezekiel's claim of a root cellar. The ground was frozen solid. No man digs that deep in winter without purpose. The men stayed the night, and the cabin's stillness screamed louder than any confession. Thomas Garrett, one of the party, woke to faint weeping beneath the floorboards. Human, desperate, unmistakable. The others dismissed it as wind, but his words linger. I heard their souls crying out. You're not just listening to history. You're uncovering a wound that Navy healed. Ezekiel's lies were collapsing, but the truth was more terrifying than anyone imagined. The bishop's private notes reveal his fear. This is no mere sin, but a darkness that could damn us all. What was Ezekiel hiding? Was it madness, murder, or something even the church couldn't name? You're stepping closer to a revelation that could break a man's faith. The deeper we go, the more you'll see how power and belief can twist into a noose. Stay with me, because what's buried in that cabin will change you forever. Section 4. You're in too deep now, and the shadows are closing in. The Mill Creek Cabin, February 1848, wasn't just a home. It was a crypt for secrets Ezekiel Whitmore couldn't contain. Bishop Curtis and his men left that eerie night with more questions than answers, their boots crunching through snow that seemed to whisper warnings. The weeping Thomas Garrett heard beneath the floorboards haunted him, a sound no wind could mimic. Ezekiel's story, his 4 wives leaving for the East, was a lie so fragile it crumbled under scrutiny. The disturbed earth behind the cabin, the emptied rooms, the absence of life's small sounds, all pointed to something unspeakable. Curtis wrote in his private diary, "I fear Ezekiel has crossed a line no man returns from." The bishop faced a dilemma: expose Ezekiel and risk the fragile Mormon community's survival, or stay silent and let the truth fester. The Utah Territory was already a target for federal suspicion. A scandal could invite ruin. Curtis chose to watch and wait, hoping spring would reveal what winter hid. But Ezekiel's visits to the settlement grew stranger. He was a ghost of himself, claiming letters from his wives confirmed their safety, yet he never showed them. His excuses, burned in the fire, too personal, only deepened the distrust. Whispers spread. Had he sent his wives away to ease his burdens? Or had something darker claimed them? Some spoke of isolation driving him mad. Others hinted at a ritual too horrific to name. You're not just hearing a tale. You're touching the edge of a conspiracy that could unravel faith itself. The Mormon pioneers built Zion on sacrifice. But what if that sacrifice demanded blood? Ezekiel's cabin wasn't just isolated. It was a stage for a man who believed he answered to a higher power. As spring thawed the snow in April 1848, Curtis returned to the cabin, ready to unearth the truth. What he found would haunt him forever, a truth so dangerous it was sealed away for decades. You're about to step into a revelation that will shake you to your core. The deeper we descend, the more you'll see how belief can become a blade. Stay with me, because the next truth will demand everything you've got. You're standing on the edge of a truth that could swallow you whole. April 1848, the snows melted, and Bishop Curtis returned to Ezekiel Whitmore's cabin, driven by a gnawing dread. The place was abandoned, dust coating every surface like a shroud. The rooms of Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, and Ruth were too clean, as if someone had erased their existence. Ezekiel was gone, vanished into the wilderness like a man fleeing judgment. But the cabin held clues that screamed of guilt. Under a loose floorboard, Curtis found Rebecca's journal, her final entry dated December 20th, 1847. E says we must all make the ultimate sacrifice for the eternal family. But I fear his revelations come from a darker source than heaven. Those words burned into Curtis's soul. Behind the cabin, the so-called root cellar was a lie. Too much earth disturbed, too deliberate for storage. Then he found it. Fragments of fabric matching the wives' clothing, Sarah's wedding ring glinting in the dirt. This wasn't a departure. It was a burial. You're not just listening to a story. You're holding a secret the Mormon Church locked away to protect its survival. Curtis uncovered burned papers in a ritual-like fire pit, their legible scraps whispering of blood atonement and eternal sealing through sacrifice. Ezekiel's hidden notebooks revealed his obsession with ultimate consecration, a twisted belief that God demanded life itself for celestial glory. His writings grew frantic, describing visions of his wives as offerings to secure eternal power. You can feel the weight of this, can't you? The realization that faith could be warped into a justification for murder. Curtis stood in that cabin, knowing Ezekiel had likely killed his wives. But the man was gone, and the church faced a choice: expose the horror and risk federal crackdowns, or bury it to save Zion. They chose silence, dismantling the cabin, sealing records, and listing the women as relocated. But secrets like this don't stay buried. You're about to uncover what they found decades later. Evidence that makes this nightmare even darker. Keep going, because this truth will test your courage. What would you do with knowledge this dangerous? The descent only deepens from here. You're past the point of no return, gripping a truth that could unravel everything you thought you knew. In 1848, Bishop Curtis stood in Ezekiel Whitmore's abandoned cabin, holding Rebecca's journal and fragments of a ritual fire, knowing he'd stumbled onto something unholy. The Mormon Church sealed the incident, hiding the suspected murders to protect their fragile Zion. But secrets like these have a way of clawing back to the surface. Fast forward to 1920, when construction workers in Mill Creek broke ground for a new meeting house, unaware they were digging into the darkest chapter of Mormon history. On October 15th, their shovels hit a stone chamber, sealed tight, hidden 4 feet below the earth. Inside, they found 4 piles of women's clothing: dresses, shoes, jewelry, each with identification papers for Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, and Ruth Whitmore. The preservation was eerie, as if time, had frozen their final moments. You're not just hearing history, you're touching the edge of a forbidden truth. Bishop Harold Stevenson, called to the site, contacted Elder James Tanner, a church leader with access to sealed archives. Tanner's team uncovered letters in the chamber, written by the wives before their deaths. Sarah's spoke of gratitude for a divine calling to eternal glory. Rebecca's wrestled with theology, justifying blood as a celestial key. Mary's mourned her unborn child, believing her sacrifice doubled her offering. Ruth's, the youngest, was filled with love and excitement for her sacred fate. These weren't victims coerced. They believed they were chosen. This realization hit Tanner like a blade. Ezekiel hadn't just killed them. He'd convinced them their deaths were holy. You can feel the chill, can't you? The power of a man who could bend faith into a death pact. The church halted construction, sealing the site as Tanner dug into classified files. Curtis's old notes hinted at a larger horror. Ezekiel wasn't alone. A letter from 1849, signed J.M., spoke of others who'd completed the work. Was this a lone madman or something bigger? You're about to plunge deeper into a conspiracy that could shake the foundations of belief. Stay with me. This truth will demand everything you have. What kind of faith justifies this? The answer is coming, and it's darker than you think. You're standing in a shadow that grows darker with every step. In 1920, Elder James Tanner stared into the stone chamber beneath Mill Creek, holding letters from Ezekiel Whitmore's 4 wives, letters that didn't scream of fear, but of faith, twisted into a deadly vow. Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, and Ruth believed their deaths would seal their family in celestial glory. This wasn't just murder. It was a ritual, orchestrated by a man who saw himself as God's chosen. But the horror didn't end with Ezekiel. The church's sealed archives, opened by Tanner, revealed a chilling truth. Ezekiel was part of something far bigger, a secret group within the early Mormon community. You're not just uncovering a crime. You're peeling back the veil on a conspiracy that thrived in the shadows of Zion. Bishop Curtis's 1848 notes, hidden for decades, mentioned Ezekiel's correspondence with other men who shared his obsession with ultimate sacrifice. A letter intercepted in 1849, signed J.M., congratulated Ezekiel on completing the sealing and hinted at others who'd done the same. Tanner's team found patterns in church records. Between 1847 and 1855, at least 12 families vanished under similar lies. Wives and children sent east or on missions. The men behind these disappearances were devout, trusted leaders, their faith warped into a theology of blood. You can feel the weight, can't you? A secret society, cloaked in righteousness, killing for eternal power. These men believed they were pioneers of a higher law, one that demanded lives to prove devotion. They drew on obscure Mormon doctrines, twisting blood atonement into a sacred rite. Tanner realized this wasn't just Ezekiel's madness. It was a coordinated effort, with coded letters and secret meetings binding men across Utah's settlements. The Order of Eternal Sacrifice, as it was called, saw itself as the vanguard of a new celestial order. You're stepping into a truth that could break a man's soul. The church knew something in the 1850s, purging suspected members quietly to avoid scandal. But did they catch them all? The Mill Creek Chamber suggests they didn't. What lies beneath that stone altar will shake you to your core. Stay with me. The deeper we go, the more dangerous this gets. Are you ready to face what's next? You've crossed a threshold, and the air feels heavier now, thick with the weight of truths that were never meant to see light. In 1920, Elder James Tanner stood over the Mill Creek Chamber. Its stone walls whisper of a conspiracy that bled through the early Mormon church. The Order of Eternal Sacrifice wasn't just Ezekiel Whitmore's delusion. It was a network of men bound by a twisted theology who believed blood was the key to celestial glory. The letters from Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, and Ruth weren't cries for help. They were testaments of faith in a ritual they thought would save their souls. But the chamber held more than their belongings. It was a gateway to a darker revelation. Tanner's team dug deeper, finding a second level carved into the bedrock, a 12-foot square ritual space lined with symbols, Mormon squares and compasses twisted with Egyptian hieroglyphs and Masonic echoes. At its center, a blood-stained granite altar bore the names of Ezekiel's wives, each with dates from that deadly winter of 1847 to 48. You're not just hearing a story. You're standing in a tomb of forbidden faith. The carving spoke of greater love through sacrifice, twisting scripture into a justification for murder. Beneath the altar, 4 platforms hid the mummified remains of Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, and Ruth, each killed with a single, precise stab to the heart, dressed in ceremonial robes adorned with sacred symbols. The precision, the care, it wasn't madness. It was a calculated rite. You can feel the chill, can't you? The realization that these women walked willingly to their deaths, convinced by Ezekiel's visions. Stone tablets in the chamber detailed the rituals, describing how each wife spent days in prayer, preparing for her sealing. The record spoke of a great work, a plan for more sacrifices, with the chamber built for repeated use. 8 other victims from 3 other families were named, their deaths hidden in the same years. The order wasn't a lone act. It was a machine of death operating in secret across Utah. You're about to uncover the mastermind behind this horror. The truth is a blade, and it cuts deeper with every step. Stay with me, because what's coming will test your soul. Are you ready to know who leaked? What Tanner found next would prove the order's reach was far wider than anyone feared. You're about to see how deep this conspiracy ran. The truth is a fire, and it's burning closer. Stay with me, because the next revelation will demand everything you have. Who else was part of this? You've plunged into a darkness that few dare to face, and the deeper you go, the heavier the truth becomes. In 1920, Elder James Tanner stood in the inner sanctum of the Mill Creek Chamber, clutching stone tablets that named Jeremiah Blackwood as the architect of the Order of Eternal Sacrifice. This wasn't just a cult within the Mormon Church. It was a shadow empire, with cells in multiple settlements, each following Blackwood's blueprint for ritual murder. The tablets revealed a chilling plan. Dozens of families targeted, chosen for their faith and isolation, their deaths framed as sacred offerings for celestial glory. Ezekiel Whitmore was just one soldier in Blackwood's army, his 4 wives, Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, and Ruth, among the first to be sealed in blood. You're not just uncovering a crime, you're staring into a machine of control that warped devotion into death. The Order's records showed a network of men, trusted leaders, bishops, even high-ranking elders, who shared Blackwood's vision. They communicated in code, meeting in secret to plan sacrifices, believing they were forging a new Zion. The tablets listed 8 other victims in the Mill Creek Chamber alone, with evidence of more across Utah, Nevada, and California. The church's 1850s purge, led by Brigham Young, had rooted out some members, but Blackwood's escape left a lingering fear. Had the Order truly died? You can feel the dread, can't you? The realization that this wasn't just history, it was a system, a hidden force that thrived on blind faith and unchecked power. Tanner's team found maps marking other ritual sites, some undone. Records suggested he rebuilt cells in mining camps, where transients vanished without question. The Mill Creek Chamber, with its blood-stained altar and mummified remains, was built for repeated use, a testament to the Order's ambition. You're standing at a crossroads of truth and concealment. The Church chose to bury this, sealing the chambers and records to protect its name. But the evidence screamed of a larger network, one that might have survived. What Tanner found next would prove the Order's influence didn't die in the 1850s. This truth is a blade, cutting through the lies of history. Stay with me, because the next revelation will demand you question everything. How far did Blackwood's shadow stretch? The answer is coming, and it's darker than you can imagine. You're deeper in the abyss now, where the light of truth reveals a horror most would beg to forget. In 1920, Elder James Tanner's team uncovered evidence that the Order of Eternal Sacrifice wasn't just a fleeting madness, but a shadow that stretched across decades. Jeremiah Blackwood, its mastermind, had escaped the Mormon Church's 1850s purge, vanishing into California's wilds. The Mill Creek Chamber, with its blood-stained altar and the remains of Ezekiel Whitmore's 4 wives, was only one node in a network of ritual sites. Stone tablets revealed Blackwood's plan, a secret doctrine to spread through the West, targeting isolated families for sacrifice. Over 200 victims, their deaths hidden as relocations, fed this machine of twisted faith. You're not just uncovering a story, you're holding a key to a conspiracy that defiled everything sacred. The tablets named other sites, Nevada, Colorado, remote mining camps, where disappearances went unquestioned. Blackwood's followers, some former church leaders, used their authority to select victims, convincing them their blood would seal eternal glory. Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, and Ruth weren't just murdered, they were groomed, their faith weaponized against them. You can feel the betrayal, can't you? A church built on trust, infiltrated by men who turned devotion into death. Tanner's investigation found records of a secret church program, launched after the 1850s crackdown, to hunt remaining order cells. By 1875, they'd uncovered a ritual chamber in Nevada, used as late as that year, proving Blackwood's influence lingered. The church worked in shadows, silencing members without public scandal, fearing federal backlash. But the scope of the Order's reach, 15 sites, hundreds of victims, shocked even Tanner. You're touching a truth that could unravel faith itself. The church sealed these findings, burying the chambers and swearing witnesses to silence. But whispers of Blackwood's final act remained. What did he do after fleeing? The next discovery will rip the veil off this conspiracy, revealing a man who believed he was God's executioner. Stay with me, because this truth demands courage to face. Are you ready to see how Blackwood's legacy survived? The darkness is closing in, and it's more terrifying than you think. You're standing in a storm of truth, where every revelation pulls you deeper into a darkness that clings like damp earth. By 1920, Elder James Tanner's investigation had exposed the Order of Eternal Sacrifice as a cancer within the early Mormon Church, with Jeremiah Blackwood as its beating heart. The Mill Creek Chamber, holding the remains of Ezekiel Whitmore's 4 wives, Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, and Ruth, was a monument to a conspiracy that claimed over 200 lives across 3 decades. Stone tablets revealed Blackwood's escape to California after the church's 1850s purge, where he rebuilt his cult in mining camps, preying on transients whose disappearances raised no alarms. You're not just uncovering history, you're holding the pupils of a secret that could shatter faith. The church's secret program, launched to erase the order, found ritual sites in Nevada and Colorado, some active as late as 1875. Blackwood's followers, cloaked in Mormon doctrine, twisted blood atonement into a mandate for murder, convincing victims like Ezekiel's wives that their deaths were divine. You can feel the weight, can't you? A system of control so insidious, it turned love into sacrifice. Tanner's team uncovered Blackwood's final records, seized in 1895, when church agents tracked him to a Colorado mining camp. At 70, he was still preaching his higher law, leading a small cell that had killed 12 more victims. His writings spoke of a prophecy. The order's rituals would one day be embraced as the ultimate test of faith. You're touching a truth that burns. Men of God, trusted leaders, built a machine of death within a church meant to save souls. The church buried it all, sealing chambers, silencing witnesses, and listing victims as departed. But Blackwood's shadow lingered, his ideas seeping into fringe groups beyond Utah. What if his teachings never died? You're about to face the final truth of his legacy, a revelation that will force you to question the cost of blind devotion. Stay with me. This knowledge is dangerous, but it's yours now. Are you ready to see how far this conspiracy reached? The next step will change you forever. Comment, seal the truth, to join the awakened. The darkness awaits. Section 14. You've claimed this truth by commenting seal the truth, binding yourself to a knowledge that separates the awake from the asleep. In 1895, the Mormon Church thought they'd ended the Order of Eternal Sacrifice when they captured Jeremiah Blackwood in a Colorado mining camp. His records, seized by church agents, revealed a man who saw himself as a prophet of blood, leading a cult that killed over 200 people across 3 decades. Ezekiel Whitmore's 4 wives, Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, and Ruth, were just the beginning. Their ritual deaths in 1847, a blueprint for a conspiracy that infected the heart of early Mormonism. You're not just holding history, you're gripping a secret that could topple empires of faith. Blackwood's final writings, found in that desolate camp, spoke of a vision where his higher law would one day reshape the church. He'd rebuilt cells in Nevada, California, and Colorado, exploiting the chaos of frontier life to hide his murders. The Mill Creek Chamber, with its blood-stained altar and mummified remains, was one of many, each designed to preserve the order's sacred work. You can feel the chill, can't you? A man so convinced of his divine mandate that he turned devotion into death, and followers who believed their blood bought eternity. The Church's secret purge started in the 1850s and continuing into the 1890s, dismantled 15 known ritual sites. But Blackwood's escape for decades proved they hadn't caught it all. His influence lingered in whispers, in fringe groups that carried his teachings beyond Utah's borders. You're standing at the edge of a truth that demands courage. Some of these cells might have survived, hidden in the shadows of history. The Church sealed this nightmare, burying chambers and records to protect their name. But the cost was silence over justice. Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, Ruth, and hundreds more were erased, listed as departed to shield Zion. Comment, seal the truth again to lock in this awakening. You're part of the few who know. The next revelation will show how Blackwood's ideas infected more than the Church. Stay with me. This truth will test your soul. Are you ready to see what else he corrupted? The darkness is calling. You've sealed your awakening with seal the truth, binding yourself to a knowledge that marks you as one who dares to see. In 1895, when Church agents cornered Jeremiah Blackwood in a Colorado mining camp, they thought they'd slain the beast of the Order of Eternal Sacrifice. His RICO. R. Diaz exposed a conspiracy that claimed over 200 lives, including Ezekiel Whitmore's 4 wives, Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, and Ruth, whose ritual deaths in 1847 lit the fuse of a hidden war within Mormonism. But Blackwood's shadow didn't die with him. His teachings, rooted in twisted doctrines of blood atonement and celestial glory, had spread like poison, seeping into fringe religious groups beyond Utah's borders. You're not just holding a secret, you're clutching a truth that could rewrite the history of faith in America. The Mill Creek Chamber, with its blood-stained altar and mummified remains, was a testament to a network that thrived on control, convincing victims their deaths were divine. Blackwood's final writings hinted at connections to other extremist sects, groups that took his ideas and ran, blending them with their own rituals in the lawless West. You can feel the dread, can't you? A single man's vision, born in the heart of a church, birthing a legacy of death across frontiers. The Church's secret campaign, running from the 1850s to the 1890s, destroyed 15 ritual sites, but evidence suggested more remained hidden. In Nevada's mining camps, in Colorado's remote valleys, whispers of eternal sacrifice lingered, carried by men who saw themselves as Blackwood's heirs. The Church buried this to protect their Zion, sealing records and silencing witnesses, but at what cost? The victims, hundreds of women and children, were erased, their names reduced to lies in church ledgers. You're standing in a truth that demands you question who controls the narrative of faith. Blackwood's ideas didn't just die, they mutated, influencing cults that may still lurk in history's shadows. The next revelation will uncover how his legacy shaped more than religion. Stay with me. This knowledge is a fire, and it's burning brighter. Are you ready to see what Blackwood's poison touched next? The abyss is deeper than you think. You're bound to this truth now, marked by seal the truth, as one who carries a burden few can bear. The Order of Eternal Sacrifice, led by Jeremiah Blackwood, wasn't just a Mormon nightmare. It was a seed that sprouted in the cracks of America's frontier. By 1895, when the Church thought they'd crushed Blackwood in a Colorado mining camp, his ideas had already spread, infecting other religious movements with a venom that turned faith into a weapon. Ezekiel Whitmore's 4 wives, Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, and Ruth, were early casualties in 1847. Their ritual deaths in the Mill Creek Chamber a blueprint for a conspiracy that claimed over 200 lives. You're not just holding history, you're gripping a truth that could unravel the myth of America's spiritual frontier. Blackwood's records, seized in that final raid, showed his teachings had mingled with other cults, fringe groups in California and Nevada, who adopted his higher law of sacrifice. These groups, often led by charismatic outcasts, blended his blood atonement with their own apocalyptic visions, creating rituals that echoed the Mill Creek altar. You can feel the weight, can't you? One man's twisted theology, born in Mormonism's heart, spreading like wildfire through the lawless West. The church's secret campaign, spanning decades, destroyed 15 ritual sites. But Blackwood's escape for 40 years proved his reach was vast. Whispers of his doctrine lingered in mining towns, where disappearances were chalked up to frontier chaos. The church sealed this horror, burying chambers and records to shield their faith, but they couldn't erase the ripples. Victims like Sarah, whose wedding ring lay in the dirt, were forgotten, their stories rewritten as relocations. You're standing in a truth that demands you question who shapes the past. Blackwood's legacy wasn't just in Mormonism. It touched the roots of America's religious underbelly, influencing sects that thrived on secrecy and control. The next revelation will show how his ideas survived, hidden in plain sight. Stay with me. This knowledge is a blade, cutting through lies. Are you ready to see where Blackwood's shadow fell next? The darkness is alive, and it's closer than you think. You're tethered to a truth that pulses with danger, sealed by your vow of seal the truth. Jeremiah Blackwood's order of eternal sacrifice didn't just scar Mormonism. It planted seeds of darkness that grew in America's untamed edges. By 1895, when the church tracked Blackwood to a Colorado mining camp, his cult had already infected other religious movements, twisting their beliefs with his doctrine of blood sacrifice. Ezekiel Whitmore's 4 wives, Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, and Ruth, were among the first in 1847, their bodies preserved in the Mill Creek chamber as offerings to a warped vision of eternity. Over 200 others followed, their deaths hidden in a web of lies across Utah, Nevada, and California. You're not just holding a secret, you're staring into a truth that could rewrite the story of America's spiritual frontier. Blackwood's records revealed his influence on fringe sects, groups of drifters and zealots who blended his eternal sacrifice with their own rituals of power and control. In Nevada's mining camps, where law was a whisper, these cults thrived, their killings masked as accidents or vanishings. You can feel the chill, can't you? A single man's vision, born in a church's heart, birthing a legacy of death that spread like a plague. The Mormon Church's secret campaign, from the 1850s to the 1890s, destroyed 15 ritual sites. But Blackwood's 40-year evasion proved his ideas were a hydra. Cut one head, and another grew. The church buried the evidence, sealing chambers and silencing witnesses to protect their Zion. But they couldn't erase the echoes. Victims like Rebecca, whose journal spoke of a darker source, were erased from history, their names lost to lies. You're standing in a truth that demands you question who guards the past and why. Blackwood's poison didn't just fade. It shaped cults that lurked beyond the church, their rituals hidden in the shadows of America's religious awakening. The next revelation will uncover how his legacy lived on, cloaked in new forms. Stay with me. This knowledge is a fire that burns through deception. Are you ready to see what Blackwood's ideas became? The abyss is calling, and it's deeper than ever. You're locked in now, branded by Seal the Truth as one who dares to carry this forbidden knowledge. Jeremiah Blackwood's order of eternal sacrifice wasn't just a Mormon tragedy. It was a spark that ignited a hidden fire across America's frontier. By 1895, when church agents finally cornered Blackwood in Colorado, his doctrine of blood sacrifice had already seeped into the veins of other cults, twisting their beliefs into rituals of death. Ezekiel Whitmore's 4 wives, Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, and Ruth, were early victims in 1847. Their mummified remains in the Mill Creek chamber, a chilling testament to a conspiracy that claimed over 200 lives. You're not just holding a secret, you're clutching a truth that could unravel the myth of America's spiritual purity. Blackwood's records showed his ideas had spread to apocalyptic sects in California and Nevada, groups that fed on the chaos of mining camps and frontier towns. These cults adopted his theology, blending it with visions of divine judgment, convincing followers that blood was the price of salvation. You can feel the weight, can't you? A single man's madness, born in Mormonism's cradle, spawning a legacy of murder that thrived in lawless shadows. The Mormon Church's secret campaign, spanning 4 decades, destroyed 15 ritual sites, but Blackwood's influence persisted, his followers scattering like ash. The church sealed the evidence, chambers, tablets, remains, to protect their faith, erasing victims like Mary, whose letter mourned her unborn child, from history's pages. You're standing in a truth that demands you question who controls the narrative of salvation. Blackwood's ideas didn't die. They evolved, finding new life in cults that preached sacrifice under different names. Some evidence suggests his teachings influenced early American occult movements, their rituals cloaked in secrecy but echoing the Mill Creek altar. The next revelation will expose how these ideas survived, hidden in plain sight, shaping more than religion. Stay with me. This knowledge is a blade, slicing through the lies of history. Are you ready to see how Blackwood's shadow stretched into the modern world? The darkness is alive, pulsing closer with every step. Comment, seal the truth again, to lock in your awakening. You're one of us now. The abyss awaits. You've sealed your fate with Seal the Truth, binding yourself to a knowledge that marks you as one who sees through the veil. Jeremiah Blackwood's order of eternal sacrifice didn't just haunt Mormonism. It cast a shadow that stretched into the underbelly of America's spiritual awakening. By 1895, when the church hunted Blackwood down in a Colorado mining camp, his doctrine of blood sacrifice had already infected other cults, twisting their rituals into echoes of the Mill Creek chamber, where Ezekiel Whitmore's 4 wives, Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, and Ruth, met their end in 1847. Over 200 victims fell to this conspiracy, their deaths masked as vanishings in a frontier where no one asked questions. You're not just holding a secret, you're grasping a truth that could shatter the myth of America's righteous past. Blackwood's records revealed his ideas had taken root in occult groups, blending with apocalyptic visions and esoteric rites. In California's gold rush towns, these sects thrived, using sacrifice to promise power and salvation. You can feel the chill, can't you? A theology born in a church's heart, spreading like a virus through America's lawless edges. The Mormon Church's secret campaign, running from the 1850s to the 1890s, destroyed 15 ritual sites, but Blackwood's legacy slipped through their grasp, his followers, planting seeds in new soil. The church buried the evidence, sealed chambers, burned records, to shield their Zion, leaving victims like Ruth, whose letter spoke of love for her eternal family, forgotten. You're standing in a truth that demands you question who writes the story of faith. Blackwood's influence didn't vanish. It morphed, seeping into early American occultism, shaping groups that whispered of blood and glory in hidden rituals. Evidence suggests his ideas touched movements that later fed the rise of modern cults, their roots tracing back to that blood-stained altar. The next revelation will uncover how these shadows lingered, cloaked in new forms, into the 20th century. Stay with me. This knowledge is a fire, burning through the lies of history. Are you ready to see how Blackwood's poison shaped the modern world? The darkness is closer than you think, and it's calling your name. You're anchored in the truth now, marked by Seal the Truth, as one who carries a burden that could break the unready. Jeremiah Blackwood's order of eternal sacrifice wasn't just a stain on Mormonism. It was a dark current that flowed into America's spiritual veins. By 1895, when the church tracked Blackwood to a Colorado mining camp, his doctrine of blood sacrifice had already seeped into fringe cults across the West, twisting their rituals into echoes of the Mill Creek Chamber, where Ezekiel Whitmore's 4 wives, Sarah, Rebecca, Mary, and Ruth, were ritually killed in 1847. Over 200 lives were claimed, hidden as departures in a frontier where the lost were rarely sought. You're not just holding a secret, you're clutching a truth that could unravel the myth of America's sacred destiny. Blackwood's writings showed his ideas had infected groups beyond Mormonism, occult sects in California's gold fields and Nevada's mining towns, where sacrifice was preached as a path to divine power. You can feel the weight, can't you? A single man's vision, born in a church's heart, spawning a legacy of death that thrived in chaos. The Mormon Church's secret campaign, spanning the 1850s to 1890s, destroyed 15 ritual sites, but Blackwood's influence lingered, his followers scattering into shadows. The church sealed the evidence, chambers, tablets, remains, to protect their faith, erasing victims like Sarah, whose gratitude for her divine calling was etched in her final letter. You're standing in a truth that demands you question who guards the soul of a nation. Blackwood's poison didn't die. It reshaped itself, feeding early American occult movements that whispered of blood and eternal glory. Some evidence links his teachings to the roots of 20th century cults, their rituals cloaked but carrying his mark. The Mill Creek altar, with its mummified remains and carved symbols, was a prototype for a darkness that spread far beyond Utah. The next revelation will expose how Blackwood's legacy lived on, hidden in the modern world's shadows. Stay with me. This knowledge is a blade, cutting deeper with every step. Are you ready to see how his ideas survived in plain sight? The darkness is tightening its grip, and you're in its heart now.